Hi, my name is Christopher, and I'm 15 years old. Don't you think that our world has recently been invaded? Not by zombies or aliens. No, it's much worse. I'm talking about people who look like living dolls. Why am I so sure? Well, subscribe to the channel and I'll tell you the story of how I came across one of them. I lived with my mom and dad in a big beach mansion. My parents were quite well off. They worked in construction. I went to an elite school and was very happy with my life. We were a model family. Then something happened to my father. One day he came home and told my mother that he wanted a divorce. I was gobsmacked. My mother couldn't understand what was going on either. She asked him what had happened, but he refused to explain anything. He simply insisted on a divorce and said that he had thought everything through and his decision was final. Just a day before that, my dad had been laughing and joking with us. I had been sure he was happy with my mother. What could have happened? I couldn't stop thinking about it. The next few weeks were a troubling time. I felt so uneasy and anxious, but in the end, my parents' divorce was made official. Mom packed her things and moved to another apartment. I stayed with my dad. I couldn't understand why my father had suddenly changed so much. But it only took a couple of days and he was back to being his cheerful old self. Dad said he was going to marry someone else and that he would introduce her to me that night. So fast? After all, not a week had passed since his divorce with my mom. But he didn't want to listen to me. In the evening, Sabrina came to our house. She had full lips, gorgeous hair, and a perfect body, and wore shiny makeup. She was a real live doll. At one point, I even thought she was made of plastic. Sabrina was also much younger than my father, and he was going to marry her? I could hardly believe it. The wedding took place very soon. My father was over the moon, and his young wife looked more like a Barbie doll than a real person in her wedding dress. Couldn't Dad see how fake she was? Had she done something to make him miss the obvious? I was completely baffled and decided to get to the bottom of it. Using her personal information, I found Sabrina's page on social media. I needed to find out more about her. And then I saw photos of her taken a year before that. She looked completely different in them. She had normal lips, hair, and an unremarkable figure. That's when I realized that her appearance was a result of plastic surgery. Her looks truly weren't natural. Her perfect body was fake. At dinner that night, I decided to expose her in front of my father. I showed him the photos I'd found on Sabrina's page and asked her if he knew who the girl was. Dad looked at them and said, "Never seen her before. What an ugly girl." I told him that that was what his new wife looked like only a year ago. My father was very surprised. The moment of truth had arrived. I'd opened his eyes to it, but the doll was calm and confident. She replied that she had corrected her imperfections with plastic surgery and did not see anything wrong with it. Moreover, she said, "You could also have your nose and cheekbones fixed. You would look even more masculine and beautiful then." My father broke into a smile and said that it was a good idea, and thanked his wife. I hadn't been expecting that. It seems I'd lost that fight. A little later, Sabrina cornered me in the hallway and told me quietly so Dad wouldn't hear, "If you mess with me again, I will make your life a living hell." That was unexpected. That night, I was so pissed at her and my father that I went to stay with my mother for the weekend. I hadn't seen her since she left after the divorce. She looked like a pale version of herself. She hadn't been eating well or doing anything except work. I felt sorry for her. I saw how awful she was feeling and realized I couldn't let it go. I had to bring that doll to justice. She had obviously done something to my dad, and I owed it to my mom to save him. I told her to forget about the divorce and have some fun. I returned home more determined than ever. I decided to find out more about Sabrina. To do that, I started to follow her around. One day, when she went to the gym, I went after her. At first, everything was going normal. She was working out for a while, but then a group of guys came by, just as doll-like as Sabrina herself. She greeted them cheerfully, and I realized that they were her friends. Then I saw her hug some blonde guy and even kiss him. He was clearly more than just a friend to her. That nasty little doll. She was cheating on my father. In the evening, I told him what I had seen at the gym earlier that day. I thought he would get angry and throw the liar out the door. Dad really did get furious, but she just hugged him as if nothing had happened and said that those had just been her friends, fashionable and stylish guys. Honey, you've got to meet them. That way you could also become fashionable and stylish. My father calmed down immediately. He kissed that witch and said that it was a great idea. How could it be? I had failed once again. Sabrina had got her claws too deeply in my father. She suggested that he throw a fancy party. My father hugged her happily, and I saw her smile evilly as she looked at me. I knew I was screwed. As promised, the doll began to make life a living hell. She started saying nasty things to my father about me, which made our relationship strained. Sabrina even hinted that I was an adult and could support myself already. She suggested he stop giving me pocket money, and Dad listened to her. I was so pissed! A few days after that, the promise party was finally held at our house. Sabrina brought her friends and that blonde guy to it. Naturally, she didn't hug that guy when my dad was around to see it. She must have said something to them because they began flattering my dad and laughing at all of his jokes. He looked happier than ever. What had she done to him to make him so stupid? I needed another chance to expose her. A few days after the party, I got my chance. Sabrina was on the phone with her friend, and I managed to overhear their conversation. The lying doll was talking about my father. She was saying that he was old and ugly, and that she was only with him for his money. Busted! My dad wouldn't stand for that. In the evening, I told him everything. My father looked at his young wife angrily, but she didn't even look afraid. Honey, Christopher's making it up. He's just jealous, she said, because he will have a brother or a sister soon. What? Was Sabrina pregnant? Or had she just made it up on the fly? It didn't matter. After all, when my dad heard it, he immediately got incredibly happy and tenderly hugged his doll. And then he began scolding me. My father accused me of trying to ruin his relationship with Sabrina and called me an ungrateful son. I felt hurt and left. I needed to take a walk and gather my thoughts. I realized I couldn't fight with Sabrina anymore. She was smarter and more cunning than I thought. But I was still convinced that she had done something to my dad. Maybe she had put something in his food, or maybe even put a spell on him. I'd already thought of all of those possibilities, but I couldn't just leave my father with her. I had to get him out of that liar's clutches. The following day, I went to school, sleep-deprived and upset. I felt dumb and couldn't concentrate on any of my classes. Naturally, the teacher noticed and sent me to the school psychologist, Mr. White. He looked at me and immediately realized that something was wrong. He asked what was troubling me, and I had to tell him everything. I said that I was sure my father's young wife was doing something to him, and it was really upsetting me. But I hadn't expected Mr. White would say that Sabrina wasn't doing anything and that it was all my dad's own fault. Mr. White explained that achieving a certain social position and relative wealth, people of my father's age often began to wish for something more. They wanted to prove how important they were and show everyone that they were not just old yet and could be cool. That's why many adults got young spouses. And there was nothing I could do about it but accept it. The psychologist's words made me very sad. What made it even more frustrating was that he was right. Only then did I begin to realize it. At that point, I was completely delusioned with my father. When I got home, he was waiting for me. He was very angry and said that he had made up his mind. He was sending me to a military boarding school for boys. I realized that his young wife had decided to get rid of me that way, and my fool of a father agreed to everything she said. I felt so angry. I told my dad that I was very disappointed in him, that I didn't want to see him again, and that I was going to live with my mother. My father didn't try to stop me, so I packed my things and left for good. To be honest, I was glad to live with my mother again. At least someone in our now formal family was reasonable. But when I went to see her, I immediately felt something was wrong. My mother was happy and cheerful. She was no longer grieving. But what had happened? And then she said she had a surprise for me. She had met a man, fallen in love, and would soon marry. Wow, I couldn't believe it. But why so quickly? But when my mother's fiancé came that evening, I immediately realized everything. He looked like a Ken doll and was way younger than my mom. But she was happy with him. That's when everything fell into place. I realized that he was only with my mother for her money. But I already knew what fighting with him would lead to, so I just sat there and didn't know where to go. Can you tell me how to get out of this situation? Write your ideas in the comments down below. I don't know what to do anymore.